Thank you so much for joining us and tuning into this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these fabulous authors and their important words and stories to readers like you. And it is no exception with our guest this evening. I am so excited to welcome a very special guest, MK Lobb, joined by Adalyn Grace, as we celebrate the release of MK's epic and darkly fabulous Seven Faceless Saints debut novel. Yay! Just a few notes before we begin our discussion. If you would like to have closed captioning for this event, you can look at the bottom of your screen and click on live transcript and then select show subtitle. You can also click the link that will drop in the chat to purchase copies of MK's fabulous new book, Seven Faceless Saints, if you haven't already, or grab one for a friend, of course. And then, of course, you can always check out Adalyn's epic books, including Belladonna, this supernaturally soothing, amazing one, along with all of her amazing other novels. And also, if you have a question for our guest this evening, you could click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. At the end of our chat, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions, and you can vote on questions you really want answered by clicking the thumbs up button. As always, please remember that this is a creative safe space, and we ask that friends be respectful of one another in their questions and comments. And enough of that, now on to the event you're all waiting for. It is my honor to introduce the darkly fabulous debut author, MK Lobb. A fantasy, yay!
Thank you.
A fantasy writer with a deep love of all things dark and macabre, from literature to humor and general aesthetic, it is no surprise that she has built such a rich and twisted world of Seven Faceless Saints that I'm so excited for readers to discover. She grew up in the small town in Ontario and studied political science at both the University of Western Ontario and the University of Ottawa. And now she lives by the lake with her partner and their cats. And when not writing, she can be found at the gym or contemplating the harsh realities of existence. But one harsh reality she no longer has to contemplate is the existence of her debut novel, because we are celebrating its much anticipated release this evening. And tonight, in celebration, MK is joined by fellow fabulous fantasy author, Adalyn Grace. Yay. Adalyn is the best-selling author of several epic and darkly beautiful novels, including All the Stars and Teeth duology, including this one, as well as Belladonna, and the very, very much anticipated follow-up Foxglove out in August. Can't wait. Oh my gosh, please. Adalyn, yeah. Adalyn graduated from Arizona State University when she was 19, and before becoming a writer, Adalyn spent 4 years working in live theater, was managing director of a nonprofit newspaper, and even studied storytelling as an intern on Nickelodeon's popular series, The Legend of Korra. When on non-writing days, Adalyn spends her time watching too much anime and playing video games with her two dorky dogs. So I'm so excited to have these two amazing voices here this evening. So now it's my pleasure to pass it over to MK and Adalyn. The virtual stage is yours.
Yay! Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, MK. Hey, so nice to see you. Yeah, thank you. That was a great introduction. Yeah, it's so nice to see you. I feel like this has been such a long time coming. I am so excited that this book is now out in the world. I had the pleasure of reading it a couple months ago. It's been like a while, and I'm so excited that it's finally out.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I feel like time has both gone super fast and also tortuously slow. Somehow both.
I know. I feel like that's just like the gist of publishing. Like you just summed it up.
It's so true. God, isn't it true?
Well, how are you feeling now that your book is out in the world? Have you gone out and seen it on shelves anywhere yet?
I did see it when I was in the city on the weekend. It was out early in Toronto at Indigo, so I did see it there. I was very surprised. And it was a surreal feeling, to be honest. I don't know if I was like, I didn't know how I would react. And I kind of just stood there and stared at it and didn't react at all. So, but like, it was good. It was good.
Have you ever had like the fantasy in your head of like hiding around the corner and just watching and waiting for somebody to like walk by and pick it up? Do you ever think about that?
Okay, it's funny that you say that because I actually did that, not like on purpose, but not on purpose, but I walked around the corner and there was a girl who was holding it and she was like reading it. And I always thought I would be really chill about it and be like watching from afar. I was not chill. I went right up and I was like, I wrote that book. And then I was like, oh God, I don't know why I did that. And then I was quick to be like, you don't have to buy it. I'm just telling you that it was horrible. I'm never doing it again. But
What did the reader say?
She didn't say a whole lot, honestly, which is why I was horrified. I was so excited. It was the first time I'd seen it. But yeah, next time I will be chill from afar because that was, yeah, I feel bad for her.
That's a huge milestone though. Like on day one of you seeing it out in the world, like you already see like a reader checking it out. That's pretty cool.
That's why I was so excited. Yeah, but next time I will not accost them in the bookstore while they're trying to mind their own business.
I think you should do it. I think you should continue doing it. But okay, I wanted to talk a little bit before we dive into the book. So this is obviously your debut, which is really exciting. It's something you only get once. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your publishing journey, if you're open to it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, cool. I have literally a notebook full of questions. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Okay. So first, when did you know that you wanted to write stories? Were you really young? Is it a newer thing?
It's not like a thing that I really sat down and thought about one day, like, I'm going to write books. I just always kind of wrote stuff. And when I was really young, I used to do this super annoying thing where I would like rewrite books that I'd read that I wasn't happy with, which is, I've learned now is called fan fiction. But at the time, I was just doing it, right? And so the first thing that I wrote was actually a Warrior Cats fan fiction. I've said this before, and I've also said before that all my friends will say, stop telling everyone that. But it's a good story. Like, that's the first thing I wrote. And then I think I was like 20 or so when I decided that I wanted to actually be published. And that's when I wrote like full-length novels for the first time. And yeah, the first ones were pretty terrible. But I learned about like getting an agent and publishing a book all from being on Bookstagram. And I decided I want to do that as if it was just super easy and you could just go do that. And it took a few years, but we got there in the end.
I really want to know what it was about Warrior Cats that you wanted to change, but we can go into that at a different time.
The end of book one.
The end of book one. Okay, yeah. Well, the more you know. So you said that this is not your first book that you've written. This is what number for you?
I was trying to think of that earlier today. It's either 7 or 8. I can never remember if I finished one of the earlier ones. So I think 7. Let's say it's 7.
That's a lot. Like most people think, and I admit to this too, like, oh, I'm going to write a book and I will get an agent and it will be published tomorrow because that's how you see it in the shows. But that's not how it works at all.
Not at all, much to my chagrin.
Was there anything about the process of, writing those books or publishing in general that you learned that really surprised you?
Well, when I first started writing and querying them, I think I was surprised by the fact that people did not immediately tell me that I was amazing. Like you send your first queries, your first draft of your first book, and then people for some reason don't want to immediately represent you and sell your book. And I was like, what is up with that? Like, so I learned a lot about querying from just watching other people do it online. Like a lot of people would make Instagram lives back when I was trying to figure out all the stuff you needed to do. So I had to do a lot of research on my own because this was before I was in the book community. And eventually we made it there, but I can't even think of a thing that I didn't learn. So I learned everything the hard way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for querying, for anybody who doesn't know, querying is just when you submit basically like a page summary about what your book is about to agents. And it's like, hey, do you want to read this? And most of the time they ignore you completely. Yeah. And then sometimes they're like, oh, sure. And then after that, they ignore you completely unless you're lucky.
Yes.
So it sounds like it was a long journey for you. 7 books is a lot.
It was. I didn't query the first 2. The first 2 were just like for fun, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I queried the next 5 and some of them went better than others. I queried way too early, which I think is a problem a lot of people have at first. But yeah, and then the 7th one took. So that was very nice.
Would you ever go back to any of those projects? Would you ever want any of those published?
Um, with the exception of one of them, absolutely not. But the one that I wrote right before Seven Faceless Saints, I did with Author Mentor Match, which is just like a program where you're paired up with a mentor and they help you kind of rework it. And that one got a bunch of requests actually, and didn't end up getting published, but I still really loved the characters and the world and stuff like that. So I ended up rewriting it a couple of years ago, and sent it off to my agent recently. So we will see if that becomes a subsequent book or not. Either way, that is the only one I would ever rewrite. The rest are, I can't even look at them.
And I think people are always surprised because most authors I ask that question to have the same exact answer. And I feel like people are always surprised by that. But I feel like those books, like you learn a lot from them. And that was kind of like their purpose. Their purpose was to get you to where you were ready to publish a story.
Yeah, so many people are like, oh, you have a bunch on the back burner. Like you have your next 7 books lined up. Like, no, you don't understand. There's no way.
If
like
only.
I'm happy I wrote them. Yeah, but
that's so
no,
funny.
I learned a lot, but they cannot see the light of day.
Well, if you were able to go back in time to tell young, hopeful MK who's querying those early agents one piece of advice, what would you tell her?
Take your time, because my main problem, still my main problem, is that I'm not patient. I want everything now. I want everything to be done as quickly as possible. And sometimes that means I work way too many hours for way too many days in a row. And like the product is not always as good as it could be. And I know when I was younger querying, I was so desperate to like get an agent and start doing things that I just had the worst early drafts that I was querying and queries that just weren't ready. And you're excited, you want to send it out and you want success right away. And that was a huge error in judgment. So I would go back and I would say, just take your time. It's not a race.
Mm-hmm. We could definitely, too, for anybody in the audience who is wanting to be an author who has more questions about publishing, we will try to answer more questions at the end. I want to dive into the story and get to talk about that. But first, I have one more question, which is just, so now that your book is out in the world, what are you most excited for?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question because there are so many things that I've just been looking forward to. And this is going to sound so cliche when I say I'm excited for the readers, but it's so true. I'm excited for the readers. Like, there's so many people who've been around to support me, like even leading up to today, who are just telling me they're excited to read my book. And now they're messaging me saying that they've read my book. And I know some people are worried about messaging authors to say, I don't know, I liked reading your stuff, thank you, but I love it because it makes me feel like I didn't just do this for no reason. Like somebody found it and it resonated with them and they enjoyed it. And that's honestly just the best.
Those are the nicest messages. I feel like there's no author in the world who doesn't want to get those messages. It's only the ones where it's like, oh, you could have done this better.
I mean, there are some of those, but I just say thanks and move on.
Yeah, we don't want those ones. But if you want to tell us you love our books, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been really great.
Well, good. And just getting to walk into a bookstore and get to see it and talk to readers about it. Yes. I hope you do like a spoiler chat in the future. Like once people have had time to read it, you should do one of those. It's really fun to just talk to people.
That would be fun. I have a lot of spoilers that I could drop, so I will try not to drop any tonight.
We'll try our best. But okay, so we are here to talk about this wonderful book that you wrote that is out today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Do you want to just pitch it real quick?
Yeah. So essentially, I'm sure everybody probably knows at this point, but it's a young adult fantasy murder mystery. It basically follows 2 childhood friends turned enemies turned maybe lovers. And what happens is it's dual point of view, and there is one character who's a rebel who's kind of against the system, and the other one is working for the system. And when all these murders start happening in their city, the unfavored people, who are the ones without magic, are getting murdered at first, so nobody cares about that. But then one person gets murdered who is a disciple, and that's someone who's blessed with magic. And that's when suddenly everybody cares that this is happening. And so these two characters kind of have to team up to solve the murder together. And while they do, they might reignite their romance flame, possibly.
Possibly.
We'll see.
It is a story that truly has like so many different interesting elements. So there's political elements, there's religious elements, there's fantastical, magical elements, and like you said, a murder mystery. How did you come up with the idea?
Honestly, I knew I wanted to write a murder mystery, first of all. And I kind of had like the ending in my mind. So I'm a pantser, which means I don't really plot unless I have to. So like I knew who was gonna do the murder and why and all this kind of stuff. But then I kind of had to work backwards and build a world around it. And the world itself actually is inspired by real history. So I don't know if anyone else is a history geek like I am, but hundreds of years ago in Florence, Italy, the city was run by these major guilds and minor guilds. And there were 7 major guilds, which were called the Arti Maggiori. And I'm sure I'm butchering that because I don't speak Italian. But they were essentially in charge of the whole economy and art system within Florence. And so when I started writing this book, it was actually a lot more historical. Like I had all the different titles from the actual Arti Maggiori. And again, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. And then that's where the 7 different guilds came from that I then assigned a saint to each one and had them have a different kind of magic instead of a different trade that they were good at. And obviously, if you read it now, you'll see that all those historical elements kind of fell away because it got really unwieldy and confusing because you've got all the made up magical world or words and then all the made up historical stuff because I kind of changed it. And it was just a lot. So it's not in there anymore, but that's where it came from.
So it sounds like there was a lot of research that went into it. It's a little bit based on real life history, but also, of course, there's magic in it. Was there any part of the research that surprised you or anything that was really cool that didn't get to make it into the books?
Anything? I don't think there was anything that didn't make it in, at least in a little bit. Like obviously all the different religious kind of inspirations I tried to seed in, and they're not historically accurate right now, obviously. But I really liked how the hierarchy of the city was set up. That was my main thing when I was researching. So, and I kind of kept that in a way because you've got the guilds and then you've got the guild representatives and then you've got the chief magistrate. And I just love I'm a politics major, as you know, and the crowd can boo, but I just love seeing how a city is set up and what the order is and what people are at the top of the food chain just within this structure and how the institutions work. So I think I kept most of that in one way or another. But yeah.
Well, one thing you said, yeah, there's a ton going on, but it's really cool. It's like a really unique story. And one of the things that you said a little while ago that surprised me is that you said you were a pantser. And I feel like there's not a lot of fantasy murder mystery in general, which I'm always seeking it out because it's so much fun. But to have to create a murder mystery alone is really difficult. And then, of course, you add like the fantastical elements to it and the magic. So was your revision process, like, were you revising a ton of this book? Did you just luck out and it kind of like magicked itselse together? I just want to hear about your process.
It did not magic itself together at all. There were a lot of drafts because like I said, I kind of knew how it was going to end. But for me, the fun is in like, how am I going to get there? Mm-hmm. And in my first draft, the way that I got there did not make any sense. And so I think the hardest part was kind of seeding in the clues and making it lead to where I wanted it to lead without making it too obvious. And so I did end up having to plot eventually. Like I tend to write my first draft and then I go back and create an outline of everything that I want to change and how I'm going to make it work in the subsequent revisions. So that's what I did. The first draft was not good. And then we start working on how I'm going to make the murder mystery actually work. And it's still funny because even people who have messaged me now, it's either like they didn't see it coming at all or they guessed it in chapter 3. And that, like, I don't know. I tend to guess it, but like near the end. And some people are really good at guessing it early. So it's still hard to tell. Like, yeah, it's just all over the map, which is really interesting to me. And I love that about writing a mystery.
Yeah, I feel like it's that way with every mystery. Like some people will just be like immediately, and some people won't have a clue what's happening until the very, very end.
It's really cool.
It is. It's super fun to get reader reactions for that. Okay, so you mentioned this a little bit earlier too. So this is multiple point of view. There are two main, I'll say, characters with their points of views who are more frequent. There are a couple other characters at certain points, but for the most part, it's Roz and Damian. So can you tell us just a little bit about their characters?
Yeah. So I think it starts from Damian's point of view. I think because I haven't read it in so long, but it starts from Damian's point of view. He is kind of like an officer within this institution, and it's sort of got a religious slant to it. So the people in charge are these disciples that are blessed by the saints. And he is not blessed by the saints, but he's kind of got this vision of how the world is supposed to work. And he believes everybody when they tell him that this is how it's supposed to be. I know you're not blessed, but you do your part, and that's how it is. So he kind of buys into that really strongly at the beginning, and he's solving these murders because it's his job. Like he's in charge of the security in the city. So when somebody gets murdered that matters to the disciples, it's his job to figure out who it is and catch them and all of that. But he's also got kind of this feeling of things aren't exactly right. Like the way the city is set up isn't fair. And I don't know if I really buy what's going on with the saints. But he doesn't want to really reflect on that because he knows it'll upend his whole life and job, essentially. And then on the other hand, you have Roz, who is his, I guess, kind of his ex. And she is completely opposite in that she is blessed by the saints. She's a disciple, but she's very unhappy about that because her father was killed by the military, and he was not blessed. And so she feels like now that she has magic, she's letting down his memory and everything that he fought for, and she wishes that she didn't have it. And she's trying to solve the murders because she's upset about all the non-blessed people who were killed that nobody cared about. So she's trying to find out who killed them. Damian's trying to find out who killed the important disciple. And they start to think maybe it's the same person who killed both of these groups. And that's where their paths kind of intertwine. And like I said, they're very different people. So it's a lot of angst.
It's a lot of angst, but in the best possible way, I think. Was one of their points of views easier for you to write?
People ask me this a lot, and I don't think one was easier. I think Roz's came more naturally to me, just because, she's obviously a very angry character. She's angry at the world, and I'm sure lots of people will say, like, the only thing about her is that she's angry, and that's not the case, but she's just so focused on getting revenge and how this world is unfair. And I really was able to tap into a teenage part of me that was extremely angry. And it was kind of cathartic to write her point of view because she doesn't look at things with nuance. She's looking at it from an angry teen girl perspective. Like, this sucks. I don't like it. I need to fix it. Like, everybody who's involved in it is terrible. And I totally felt that when I was a teen girl. I'm not going to lie. And so in that sense, it was easier to write her perspective because it was very, very pointed and very driven. And Damian's was a little more thoughtful.
This question just came to my head, so it's a little bit random, but were you nervous at all writing that like angry main female character? Because I feel like they get a lot of unnecessary judgment. Yeah.
Was I nervous? In a way, yes, because I immediately knew that that's not going to be for everybody. Like, she's less angry now than she was in my earlier draft, which might be difficult to believe, but I was really in a place where I was just writing at the start and channeling all my rage into it, whether it made sense or not. And obviously I pulled back on that. But I think, yeah, when you write a character like that, who's so focused on the negatives in their world and so focused on like the bad things that have happened to them and just feeling angry the entire time. It's difficult because you don't want that to be their only personality trait, right? But also, if that happened to me, all I would feel all the time is anger. And I'm the kind of person who, when I'm upset about something or sad, like I find it's easier to be angry than it is to be upset. And that's what I was trying to do with her. Like she's got the pain and all the trauma, and she's angry because that's easier than dwelling on everything that's gone wrong. So yeah, I know it won't be for everybody. Not everybody likes reading a character like that, but I do.
But it's true. It's like that is how people feel. And I think it's so necessary to get those characters and to read those point of views. And, if she was a male, she would be broody. And it's a little bit different. Since she's a female. So I was just very curious about that. But yeah, I think, we can't always just write characters who smile and are happy. That's not interesting either.
Yeah, I think what's important to me is that I want people to understand why she's angry. Like she's not just angry running around for no reason. Like these things have happened to her that are terrible and everything around her sucks. So yeah, she's angry all the time. And I hope it makes sense when you read about it.
I think it totally does. All right. My next question is a two-parter. Okay. So what was the most challenging part of writing this book? And what was the most fun part of writing this book?
The most challenging part, absolutely, was trying to make the murder mystery element work while also having all of the world building elements in the story. Well, you write fantasy, you know how it is when you're trying to build a world, because there are so many things that you need to get across to the reader, but you can't just dump world building in every chapter, especially when you've got these complicated relationships going on and you've got this murder mystery thread happening. So I think, yeah, a big part of it for me that was hard was balancing all these characters and where I need them to be by the end. Like I need their motivations to make sense and I need them to be able to grow. But I also need to have this murder mystery thing going on, and I need to set up this entire new world. So it's kind of a give and take. And again, like with the murder mystery element, there are people who always want more world building, and there are people who say there's too much world building. So you really just have to dial into your own brain and try and figure out what the right balance is. And the second part, I think you said, was what's the most fun?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The most fun for me in every book that I write is writing the relationship between the main character and the love interest, or in this case, both the main characters, at the beginning of the book, because I love writing when they're angry at each other and there's a bunch of angst. Like once they make up and it's the honeymoon period, I'm not that interested anymore, I'll be honest. Like I love the angry part when they're just snappy at each other and you have to kind of push them back together. But I also love writing the scene where they do start to kind of reveal pieces of themselves to one another. So I guess the character dynamic is my favorite thing to write because I'm a big fan of the enemies to lovers sort of vibe going on. That's just fun.
That's one of my favorite tropes. I love that one so much. So we're going to dive into a speed round soon. I have a couple more questions first. I really want to know first about the title of this book, Seven Faceless Saints, if that was always the title. And also I want to talk about the beautiful cover and just how it came to be. Like, did you send over a mood board? Did you pitch any ideas? How did it happen?
Okay, so for the cover, I know a lot of people have, like a lot of authors at least, have a lot of like Pinterest mood boards and stuff like that. They've been thinking about it for a long time. I did not. I didn't really know what I wanted it to look like. So I just sent a list of book covers that I liked. And basically said, here are some vibes that I'm into, and I don't want people on the cover. Please make something good. And the designers and the artists did an amazing job. Clearly, they came back with, I think there were two main sketches that we were looking at. And at first I thought I wanted the other one because I wasn't sure I was into the idea of like the bloody statue. But they convinced me that it would look better with the statue one. So we went with that. And they were so right because it looks pretty cool.
It's really cool. Although I also want you to like secretly send me the sketch of the other one because I'm really curious.
I will show you. It's very basic, but yeah, it just wouldn't have been as eye-catching, I think. It was a very basic like fantasy cover, which I think is why I was initially drawn to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the one that we ended up going with really works.
It's so
well.
striking, just like the pure
Yeah.
white and the blood. Yeah, I love it. What about the title? Was that always the title?
It was always the title. And people always ask me, like, when did you think of it? And I don't really know. I know that I was writing the characters like walking up to a church at one point in a really early draft. Um, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there were statues of saints and they didn't have any faces? Like, that would just be awesome. And
There were
then,
7 of them.
and it's 7 because my favorite number is 13, but that felt like too many. And my second favorite number is 7. So that's why there are 7.
Yeah, 13 would be a lot if you have to write like
Yeah.
a history for all of them. That would be a ton. I mean, 7's still a lot, but
That's when I connected it to like the historical guilds. I'm like, oh, there's 7 of those too. Like this works perfectly. So yeah, not a very interesting story, but that's how it came to be. Oh, I can't hear you. Wait.
my audio cut off somehow. But okay,
okay.
I love that title so much, and you have an announced sequel coming up as well. What's the
do.
title for that one?
It's called Disciples of Chaos,
And
which
was
is
that always the title?
no, and I'm relieved that it is easier to say than Seven Faceless Saints, which has a lot of S's, and I'm very tired of trying to say it clearly. No, we went through a few different titles for the second book. I can't even remember the earlier ones that I came up with, but I think it was my editor who came up with Disciples of Chaos. And it just fit the story really well and it sounds cool. And as you might have gathered, I just like things that seem cool and sound cool. So we went with that.
Yeah, sequel titles I feel like are always tougher. They're always
Yeah.
I don't know very many people who just like automatically know their sequel title. I feel like it's always like this long, lengthy discussion.
It has to sound good with the first one, but like also be cool by itself. So yeah, it's tough. I wanted like another number in the title initially, like 1 something something, but none of the ones I came up with were good.
8 saints with faces. There you go.
Perfect. Nailed it.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into the speed round. There's a couple questions, and as I'm asking them, feel free to go ahead and write questions in the chat because we're going to get to the Q&A very, very soon. We could talk about publishing, about MK's book, debut journey, whatever you want to ask, just feel free. Okay, MK, speed round.
Okay.
You don't have long to think about these. And there's a lot of weird questions. I'm sorry, I was doing my best here.
I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm ready.
Okay. You can't think about this one. You just have to answer. Okay, so without spoilers, what is your favorite scene in the book?
The bathhouse one, which actually came from another author who I'm friends with. She says you need to have a scene set in a bathhouse, and I was like, okay, and I like it.
What a good friend. Okay, I'm really gonna get to know you here. You can only eat one food for the rest of your life. What is it?
Bread.
Ooh, what kind?
Sourdough. I don't know any of them.
I love sourdough. Okay. Which of your characters would you be best friends with?
I want to say Roz, but I feel like she would bully me. Probably Dev because he's kind of on the side and kind of silly when he's not grieving. So probably him.
Okay. Are there any characters from books or movies that Roz would be besties with?
Ooh, I feel like she would be friends with Jude from The Cruel Prince
I can
because
see
they were
that.
both like badass and kind of mean.
And schemy and thoughtful and smart.
Yeah.
Okay, you can only read one book or series for the rest of your life. All of the other ones just vanish from the world and you will have no memory of them. What is it?
Why would you make that a question? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
I love speedrun questions. I just get to bully people.
Oh my God. Okay. Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor
Oh my
because I love
gosh.
her and I read that like every year anyway. I cry at the end every single time. I don't know why, just because I love it so much.
I loved that book. That was the first, I was young and that was the first arc I had ever gotten. And I remember like
Oh, really?
I sent a message to the publisher and I didn't know how to send messages to the publisher at the time. And I was just like, this is amazing. Can I have the sequel? Like it was just already in existence.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Why
I
not?
love that book so much. Okay. Who is the best Disney villain?
Oh God. You asked me if I knew about Disney, and I was like, yeah, but I thought you'd ask me my favorite princess. I don't
Yeah,
know
you're
very
like
many villains.
princess.
The lady with the tentacles
Ursula.
in that's the only one I can think of.
Okay.
Her.
Current obsession, book, movie, show, or game?
I don't play any games, like video games. I don't really watch any movies. I'm currently rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I guess that is my show obsession. And my reading obsession right now is pretty much any rom-com. I'm reading a bunch of them at the same time right now. So anything funny and romantic.
What are you
I know
reading?
it's not specific, but well, I'm reading a bunch of arcs at the same time. But I'm reading Unfortunately Yours right now, which is very good. I'm also reading Love at First Set, which is an arc. These are both arcs, which isn't really fair, but it's sapphic, and one of them works at a gym, and I love going to the gym. So it was basically made for me, but I love both of those right now.
When I was working on these speed run questions, I was literally like, okay, how can I incorporate like a gym question in here? Like, what part of your body would you work out if you could only work out one part? But I was like, that's
the answer
too
is
weird.
back.
Oh, okay, you have an answer.
I love back day.
That is like I've never heard anyone answer back day, although I don't ask that question a lot, but
that's fair.
Do you have anything fun planned to celebrate your launch? That's not really a speed round, but you could answer anyway.
I didn't really plan anything. I'm not really like, and I don't like to be the center of like an event usually. But my mother is amazing and she plans like a mini event with my close family and like set up a bunch of my books as decor almost. So that's what I did this afternoon. It was very sweet. But other than that, I'm going to the store tomorrow to see my book in a store. And those are my two big plans.
That is super sweet and super fun. Okay, I have two more. Batman or Superman?
Superman, because Henry Cavill's really hot and that's the only thing I can think of.
Did you say Superman? Okay, then Superman or Batman? Or I already asked that. Sorry, Superman or Spider-Man?
I don't know anything about Spider-Man. I've never watched the Spider-Man, so I've never watched the Superman either, to be honest.
Like just Henry. Okay.
Based on the actors.
Who is your favorite warrior cat?
Oh my God, that's a terrible question. It was always Spotted Leaf, and that's why I was upset about book one, because she was only in book one and then she dies and then she like comes to the main character cat in his dreams and stuff. And I loved her, so I rewrote her into it. But yeah, I know that was more than you anticipated.
What did you write? Did you just write your fan fiction like randomly, or did you post it anywhere?
I did not post it anywhere. I didn't know that that was even a thing when I was younger writing it. It was just in like notebooks. Like I hand wrote it into notebooks that had cats on the front of them that I got at Dollarama.
Yeah, it's very aesthetic of you. All right, we have some questions from the Q&A. I will go through them and ask you. Okay, so one, any tips for writing dual point of view?
Yes, actually. So my main tip is plot out the plot before you start deciding what's going to happen from each person's point of view, because otherwise you might overlap a lot. So I kind of, well, now that I plot, because I have to, I do the whole outline of events first, and then I kind of try to assign an event to a point of view, so that it's just happening from that character's perspective, because otherwise I tend to go back and write it from a different character's perspective, and there's just too much going on. So decide who is telling you what. And I think another thing that's really helpful to do is to kind of write scenes that might not make it into the book just from a character's perspective, so you kind of get their voice down. Because I think when you're writing two different point of views, especially when it's third person, you really need to figure out how they're going to sound so they don't sound too similar. And so for me, I just wrote a couple little fun outtake scenes and decided like, how does this person sort of look at the world around them, and how does this person look at the world around them, and what are the differences between those two, just so they don't sound too similar. Like if you cover the name at the top of each chapter, would you know who it is? So that's a test that I try to do for myself.
That's a great idea. I really like that idea. Okay. There is another question from, I'm sorry if I mispronounce anyone's name, but I think Devana, which is also a big history nerd, and wants to know what was the most interesting thing you had to research?
Oh, for this book specifically, my brain is full of research from my next book, which is a historical fantasy also. I don't have a lot left in my mind about this book right now. But I did do a ton of research into art at the time, because these guilds were into the arts and culture, and like they were controlling the economy and doing different sorts of forms of art. And so I don't think that's probably interesting to everybody, but just researching like what was most important at the time in Florence when it comes to art was really interesting to me. And so I did a lot of research on that. That was absolutely unnecessary because my book doesn't even have art in it, but there you go.
Okay, Brianna would like to know if you have any world building advice, and they're very excited to read your book.
Oh, thank you, Brianna. World building advice. Yeah, my advice is don't do what I did, which is just start writing without a document where you put all the information about the world in it. I have since then started doing a document beforehand, where I kind of set up, well, I break the world apart into like, what is the military system? At least that's what I needed for this book. What is the religious system, if there is one? What is their relationship with any other cities around them? What's the institutional framework? And I'm getting to politics major here, but like, what is the function of their government? Like, I'm very focused on how the government works in a book, and that might not be a big part of your book, but if it is, it affects everything that's going to happen in the story. So I guess my main point is break it down into sections when it comes to world building and decide which ones are important, and then kind of figure out how that impacts the different characters. Like, how do they feel about those things? How does it impact the plot? What roadblocks are going to come up because of the way this world is set up? That would be the main thing. Just try and make it easier. Don't try and go into the world and throw everything into it at once, because I've done that and it is not a good idea.
I think that's great. I think too, like if worlds have magic in them, I always try to imagine like how does that magic influence the world? Like how does it influence the politics? How does it influence the jobs? How does it influence what they wear? Things like that. I always think is very fun, like very aesthetic too when you go to like read the book. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, Krista would like to know, will you always write in this genre, or do you get ideas from many genres?
I will probably always write fantasy. I say that, but I don't know if that's true. I'll always write young adult or above. I'll say that. I'm not really good at any of the kid lit. I need there to be like a romance line. I'm very into that. And I need to be able to say the F word if I need to. So I will probably write fantasy and YA or adult. Yeah, I never want to say never, but I'm really into like the magical elements, and I like to set it in a world that's either not ours at all or kind of a alternate historical world. Yeah, but we'll see.
Okay, this person would like to know books and gray cats is their name. I love that name. I like gray cats.
I recognize that name.
Did any other character in media inspire and or feel similar to Roz? We do love an angry girl.
We do. Honestly, when I was writing her, I didn't have anyone in mind. Mostly because I don't like I read other books, but I don't really watch like movies or anything, which my friends hate about me. I never watch films and I only watch like comedy shows. So there wasn't anyone from media that really came to mind when I wrote her. It was more coming from me. Like, I'm angry. Here are all the things I was angry about as a teen, and I'm gonna put these into this character. So I never really had another character in mind that inspired her. Like in hindsight, I can see other ones that are similar, but the answer is no, it just came from my brain.
Okay, if anybody, we have a couple more, but if anybody else has one that they want to ask, I would recommend trying to get it in now just so we have the time. But Krista would like to know what inspired you to pursue publishing in general. They'd also like to know, which I think they asked this before we got to it, what inspired you to write this book. But I think maybe talking about like publishing in general too would be great. Why did you want to write books? Like, why didn't you want to write movies or anything like that?
Um, I read a lot of books and I loved reading books. I have pretty much my whole life. And like I said, I started writing like fan fiction type stuff really young. And it's just, I feel like I'm not very good at explaining my feelings verbally, which I don't know if you can tell right now or not, but I just find it so much easier to kind of work through stuff when you're writing it down. And so like if I'm having a bad day, I love to come home and write my characters and like they have my problems now, you know? Um, as for why I didn't do something else, I honestly don't have an answer for that. I don't know how to write scripts for movies or anything, so I just never thought about even trying to do that. Um, I've just always wanted to write books. Like, yeah, I love books and I wanted to make them. That's as simple as I can be.
Books are good. I mean, sometimes you just know and you just want what you want.
I guess.
Sam O would like to know if you could, I like this question. If you could be a disciple of one of the saints, which would you choose?
Oh, okay. So I've had people ask me which one would you be, like naturally, but if I had to choose, that's different, and I like that. Um,
Oh, okay.
I
Can you answer for both?
I guess so. I usually say that if I had to be one, like based on who I actually am, I would probably be like patience or death. Maybe patience because they're very like justice focused, and I am very annoying if I don't think something is fair. That like eats at me forever. I don't like when things aren't fair, and I always want to like make things right, whether the other person wants me to or not. Um, but also, I feel like death is very individualistic, and I'm kind of like that as well. I tend to be very inside myself. So it'd have to be one of those two. And I'm sorry, I'm not narrowing it down. But if I picked, I would pick chaos because I think they would be the most powerful. They can like create illusions and stuff. And I would want to be powerful and, you know, make people do stuff if I could.
That gets me
Which is
more
a terrible
excited.
answer, but
It gets me more excited for the sequel, though. Disciples of Chaos. So you're talking about chaos. That
yeah,
sounds pretty cool. I guess we won't
I
get into
can't say
spoilers,
anything
but
about that.
okay. Who's your favorite Brooklyn Nine-Nine character?
This is so basic, but it's Rosa. And everybody knows that I love Rosa because she's so badass and she has weapons everywhere. And I just think that's awesome. She's like, I watched one yesterday. She's like, what kind of woman doesn't have an axe? And I'm sitting there like, yeah, why don't I have an axe? Which is ridiculous. But
Okay. Kika would like to know what are some books that informed your career as an author, like favorite books or influences?
oh, there's so many. I've read so many books. But I have to say, I'm going back to Laini Taylor because her prose is like that's like the
Beautiful.
epitome of good prose to me. That's the kind of book that I read, and you can read one paragraph of it anywhere in the book, and you're like, I want to be able to write like that. And I can't, but maybe someday. So that definitely inspires me. Um, I'm also a big fan of V.E. Schwab's books. I love Vengeful and Vicious, and I love the Dark Shade of Magic series. Um, God, I can't think of books that didn't inspire me. Like all of my favorite YA books inspired me in some way. Like whether because it's amazing world building or the magic system's cool, or I just love their writing style. Um, I feel like I need to look behind me so that I can see all the books that I have.
I know, I always do that too. I turn to my side like, hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, those are probably the main two though. Like those are the ones I reread the most as I was writing was The Dark Shade of Magic. I know that's adult, but I feel like it has the kind of awesome world building that I like to go for. And then Laini Taylor's stuff. Oh, and Maggie Stiefvater, because I love her
Mm.
writing style as well. Yeah. I'm a big sucker for like really nice writing. Like maybe the world isn't my favorite. It is in these cases, but as long as the writing is beautiful, I will read it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
those are some of my favorites too. They are all so talented, absolutely amazing authors. Okay, I think this is our last question from the audience, which is, can both of you tell us something about your upcoming projects? Would you like to go first?
I'm trying to think of anything I could say, given that I'm not even done editing this book and everything is a spoiler.
And our
Do you want
publicist
to
is
go
watching.
first? Oh yeah. Do you
Um,
want to go first?
so I'm working on something right now that I can't necessarily talk about, but before the month is over, it will be announced. So I will get to tell you all about it in a couple weeks.
Tell me after this. I'm so intrigued. Okay, I feel like I can't say a lot about my sequel because, like I said, it's not like set in stone. I'm still working on it, and also everything is a spoiler. Like I can't think of anything interesting about it that's not a spoiler, except if you like the trope of like the soft boy losing his mind, then you will like the sequel. I like that. So if you want to see Damian kind of go off the edge, then keep an eye out next
Stick
year.
around. Okay, where would people follow you so that they can be most up to date when you get to talk about the sequel?
They can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at MK_Lobb. They can also follow me on TikTok, but I make like one TikTok every 3 months when the inspiration strikes. I have a website. It's mklob.com, I believe. And I should have a newsletter, but I don't send one because I am too lazy to write it at this point, but maybe someday.
I feel the
Yeah.
same way about newsletters. But okay, I think that's all from us. But just thank you, everyone, so much for coming out and hanging out with us to celebrate this amazing book. I hope that you all enjoy it as much as I did because I am obsessed with it. I love it and it's gorgeous.
I love your work too. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And you're both amazing. And MK, your writing is amazing. So I'm so excited for everybody to get to see your world, as well as Adalyn. Oh my God, we're so excited for everything you're coming out with as well. But sadly, I wish we had more time to chat, but that's all we have for questions. Thank you all so much for all your questions and contributions. And of course, big thanks to MK and Adalyn for joining us this evening and sharing your amazing worlds and important insights. And of course, thank you all viewers so much for being here this evening and supporting these amazing voices. So thank you. Don't forget, you can still click on the link to grab a copy or two of this awesome book, Seven Faceless Saints. It is so good. So many spoilers. I wish we could ask more questions, but we'll have to have that spoiler conversation too. As well as definitely check out Adalyn's amazing book. Oh my gosh, we're so excited for the next one, as well as the duologies. And of course, as an independent bookseller, we are so thankful for all your support and supporting these great voices. You can check out about other events, our updated listings. You can follow us at Kids and Teen Department on social media at Kids and Pros, and we'll drop those handles in the chat box as well. And you can watch this event as well as past events on our YouTube page. So of course, thank you so much, everyone, again. I hope you keep reading widely and expanding your world and discovering these fabulous new ones. So you all have a great evening. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you.